Go inside the studio with the Ricky Harris Media Podcast. Here's your host, Ricky Harris.
The Ricky Harris Media Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for checking this out. We greatly appreciate that. And I say we, even though it's just me that handles the tracking, the content, the post-production, mix down, the music. I recorded the music, I performed it, recorded it, mixed it. But I say we because everyone in my life and my experiences on set and off set has all had a great influence on this podcast and all the information that is in it. And I greatly appreciate everyone that has been involved in my life, friends and family. And of course, coworkers and people like you that listen to this show and support it. How can you support it exactly? Not really asking for any donations. I mean, I would appreciate that, but that's not really the goal here. Support it by sharing this podcast to anyone that's interested in production, anything creative, and if they're into cars, because I am a big car nut too. I love performance and I love technology and I love the mashup of analog and digital. And that is not just in recording, not just into film production or television production, but in cars too. That's why I love the Resto Mod, where you take a classic car and you modernize it. It's such a great blend of analog and digital. Do not get me started on car talk. Oh my God, I could do a 3-hour show on car talk alone. And unless you're into cars, you're going to be very bored. I do want to take a moment to talk about the goals for this studio. From the get-go, it's always been about getting demos. And I'm kind of focused on music in this studio, but I do love to do spoken word podcasts, voiceovers, tracking if you want to track vocals for your song, your movie, your commercial, voiceover work. I'm getting into voiceover work. I've done radio before. I've done a few YouTube projects, and it's a blast, but definitely my expertise is on the engineering side. If you need an engineer and studio space to record some good dry voiceovers, voiceovers are extremely important for setting the mood in movies and film and commercials, podcasts. I mean, it really does set the mood. And of course, the music. Music, I want to talk about the goals for the studio in music. If you want to record a demo for your band, for your vocal work, let's say you've already got the music, but you want to track the vocals, you want to get a good demo. And really, I feel pretty confident we can get a pretty good recording from the get-go. Now, with the preamps and the mics and mainly the acoustic space here, if you want to do that, I do not charge for demos. So you come in, you're helping me out because I love working with artists. I love giving that rubber meets the road to an artist, and that being, the engineering side, the actual tracking and recording and processing. I love that part. That's my favorite part, and I love that in film and television production. I love being a crew member. So if you need any of that, any kind of demo work for your music, just hit me up on Twitter. It's Ricky Radio, RICKY Radio. Let me know. And if you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area and you want to get a demo, I do not charge for that. You're helping me out a lot, and it's just a straight up trade from me. All right. One more thing, and then we're going to get into some little technical stuff, some technical information, some stuff that I've learned over it's over a decade now. It's coming up on 15 years of being in media in some form, part-time and full-time, kind of all of it combined. But I do want to give a plug. Check out Hysteria on Peacock. Hysteria. really interesting show talking about the 80s satanic panic. And it's coming out October 18th, Friday, October 18th on Peacock. It may come out on NBC television and the many television networks, but right now it's going to be coming out on Peacock October 18th. And if you have Peacock, check that out. You may see my Camaro in it, and you may see me in it. That was a fun project. The trailer is out for that on YouTube. Check it out. Hysteria, Peacock. Just search that. It's creepy, man. Oh, it's creepy. Oh, but it's gonna be a fun ride of a show. Faux show. So I was reading up on the Tentacle Sync E MK2 about synchronizing time code, and it's really interesting the advancements of this. Because all of this stuff is starting to mash up, and I've recently put together a video using mixtures of video from my my cinema camera and a couple of friends' iPhones, and kind of put all those together. For synchronizing audio and video, time code is extremely important. So I was reading up on that Tentacle Sync E MK2, and you can sync iPhones and Android devices together, and with the apps, you can download apps for them, and it just makes it extremely easy. So it's a hardware device, but also apps to synchronize all this stuff. And like I said, anything you can do on set, on scene, to make your life easier when it comes down to editing later, oh man, that is worth a lot, because that can get extremely annoying, synchronizing all this, because that will make your video very interesting, having multiple cameras, multiple mics, a lot of different stuff. But of course, that gets very complex. And then when it comes down to editing, it can be a real pain. And that's what I ran into on shooting wedding videography. I always like to have at least 2 cameras, preferably 3. This last production I did, I had 3 cameras. And that is a little more difficult when you're kind of doing it manually. Not impossible. And of course, like I talked about on the last show, you can use a take slate board, but you don't want to do that for a wedding, for example. I mean, that's you're basically, the way you shoot a wedding is kind of like shooting it like you're a news crew, but also like you're a movie crew. It's both of those kind of combined. You're covering the story, and you don't want to interfere with the story at all. Okay, so I was using consumer equipment and kind of synchronized all that. So how did I do it? It's really not too bad. I kind of mixed down everything. I mixed down the audio. That was like my first step, because I did have audio from 2 different sources. My field recorder, it was mainly there as a backup, but it also provided me with a little bit of surround sound. So it was recording 3 tracks, 1 mono microphone, and it's just a small diaphragm condenser, which is actually pointed up at the bride and groom. So that way, if whatever reason I lose my wireless lavalier, I still have that as a backup. Kind of backwards, and we're starting to see that trend too in film, where the lavaliers have gotten so reliable. Now your small diaphragm condenser or your shotgun mic, your boom mic, is now the backup. I did the same sort of thing with this video. So you can look at the waveform. This is the beauty of editing digitally. I use Reaper. I love the Reaper as a DAW, the digital audio workstation software. It's real reasonable. I want to say it's about $120, and it's a one-time fee. Software, I believe it's made in Australia. Very popular for singer-songwriters and independent bands. They love Reaper, but it's a really great DAW for doing your independent film work or videography. Any kind of mix down for sound for video works great for that too. So I brought everything into Reaper, and it allows you to see the waveforms. So every camera, well, in this case it was my cinema camera, which actually has 2 XLR audio inputs. I only used 1 of those. That was in mono. I used it for my wireless lavalier, and the lavalier was on the groom. Now, if you want to see a clip of this video, it is on my YouTube channel, Ricky Harris Media. so you can kind of follow along, and you'll notice the microphone clipped to his jacket. Okay, so that's camera A, my cinema camera. Camera B was a camera actually on a tree. It was one of those action cameras. It's kind of like a GoPro, very similar to a GoPro, and it was just strapped to a tree, and that was my B shot. So that provided left of set, stage left. And then I had a camera C, which was like my weeds camera. That was facing back towards, the crowd, the people, the family, the friends and family, and that was kind of providing me a shot there. And those shots B and C are really good to go to when you're repositioning A. So I was running A. I was running the cinema camera on a tripod. So every camera in my field recorder, so we're talking 4 devices here: cinema camera, camera A, camera B, and the field recorder. They're all recording audio, and in this case, it's all on-set sound for the most part. Vast majority of it's on-set sound. So they're all recording it. And the B and C, they're really cheap microphones, and they're buried inside the device. They're very muffly, but it's good enough to give you a waveform, and it's crisp enough that you can actually use the waveform to slide and synchronize. And I believe there is some software too to do this more automatically. So you can slide and synchronize using the audio. You could do that for mix down. That's what I did first. I mixed everything down, so I was synchronizing because I wanted to kind of mix that. And if you listen really closely on that clip on my YouTube channel, you can hear the mix a little bit. So you can hear me bring up the Groom mic, which was my mono talent mic, I guess you would say. But also I could bring up my stereo off the field recorder, but also bring up the mono too, to kind of get a little more sound, to make it feel a little more realistic, and then just kind of balance the mix, to just basically so it feels exactly and sounds exactly like it is when you're there. So that technique came from this big deep dive that I ran into on synchronizing audio, because it was just painful. And I'm like, there has got to be a better way. And with digital technology, you can. Now, at that point, I knew where everything was in time based on the waveform, even though I wasn't even using that audio from B and C, the action cameras, the little tiny cameras. I was just using that sound that it recorded to synchronize. That way, every cut was synchronized. Okay, so in practice, that sounds cool. Or I'm sorry, in theory, that sounds cool, but in practice, I don't have the luxury of time code here. But what I do have is runtime for the clip. Okay, let's say camera B ran for 42 minutes and 6 seconds. Camera C ran for 38 minutes, and camera A ran for 35 in 2 seconds. So once using waveform to match everything, you can figure out your offset on time. Okay, so camera A was, 6 minutes behind. Camera C was 2 minutes ahead. And you come up with all these offsets for time, and I had this big piece of paper, and I was just writing it down on pencil, writing all these offsets in. And that way, and then I, keep track of how much of the clip that I used for each cut. So I went from runtime of camera B, let's say at 7 minutes and 6 seconds to 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Then I know, okay, I'll subtract that from my offset. It was still painful, but it made it a little more scientific. You know what I'm saying? So that way, you don't really have too much slip. You do a little bit with compression of video. You don't have slip like you used to in the analog days, because everything was kind of dependent on the motor. And, the motors are not really synchronized unless you are jamming to time code. But there's not really that much slip. So you can kind of use that runtime of your clips. It'll display that, when you start switching, it'll display that runtime. And you can just sit there and synchronize from there. But I really want to get this tentacle device, and that'll make life so much easier. It's really pretty affordable. That's the great thing about all of this. Production gear, over the 20 something years that I've been really deep into this, really editing digitally and recording digitally. Been doing this about 20 years. I've really seen just a depreciation of the cost of equipment to get this, going, which is really great to see. A camera I bought in 2004, it shot in standard definition on tape, was over $3,000. And yes, I did make up some of that in my videography. Not a lot, but I made about $1,000 shooting. So overall it was a loss, but still, wow, that's just crazy to think about it. $3,000 in 2004 money. That's what it cost. And it was not even high definition. More recently, the camera that I have now, it's a 1080p camera, and I paid $1,600 for it. So about half and over double the picture quality. And it's all solid state. I love this camera. It will record onto regular SD cards, nothing fancy. So it's kind of a prosumer camera, which is great because it keeps the cost down on running it. You don't have to have these expensive flash cards like P2 cards. It just takes a regular consumer grade SD card. But this is something that I researched, and before I bought this camera, I know that SD cards can fail, and I've had them fail on me. They are very robust, but if you constantly are recording to them, they will fail on you, and then when they fail, they won't do anything. They are just dead. And then you're like, uh-oh, I lost like 45 minutes of a wedding video. What am I going to do? This camera will actually record to 2 SD cards at the same time. So you have redundancy. You have card A and card B. Oh my God, if you're in the market for a camera and you want to do a video, highly recommend doing that, having some redundancy. You don't have to have it all in camera. You can actually have a recorder that records off the HDMI out, have a clean HDMI out. Clean being it doesn't have, your time code and your freaking shutter speed and frame rate and all that. Your weight, your audio VU meters or your VUs or your peak meters, whatever. However it displays audio level. You don't want all that recorded. So you can put it on clean and then just record it externally. And that's a really good way to go, because you don't want to put all of your faith into one storage medium, especially when you're shooting something that you can't reshoot. I do want to take a moment to talk about getting it right at the source. Very important. It's a technique that comes from recording music. So if you're recording an acoustic instrument, for an example, violin, acoustic guitar, acoustic drum kit, if you're not happy with the sound like you hear with your own ears or with a single microphone, or you're playing your guitar at the house before you go to the studio, if you're not happy with that sound, then you're stepping way back. Fixing it in the recording process is going to be very, very difficult and very time consuming. So get it right at the source. This technique applies to video production, cinematography, photos, getting your lighting right, getting your white balance right, getting your framing right, getting your focus right. Extremely important. Yes, you can fix a lot with software, but for your sanity and your speed of production, it's a lot easier to get it right at the source. Get your picture like you want it, in camera, what you see in the viewfinder or on your LCD display. Get it right there, and then, oh my God, your life will be so much easier when it comes down to editing. I think that's going to be about it for this episode. I greatly appreciate you guys and gals for checking this out. I do want to talk next week about how do you get started in BG and background. How do you get some on-set experience? It's really not that hard in the 21st century. Really not that bad at all. We are on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeart, and check out the YouTube. It is Ricky Harris Media, RICKY. Ricky Harris Media, all one word on YouTube. And check out my Twitter, Ricky Radio, RICKY Radio, all one word on Twitter. And that's the best way to contact me. If you want to record something, again, demos, no charge for them. You want to come in and lay down some vocals, and then you have your demo or your final product. If that's all you're wanting, you just want a good vocal recording, hit me up on Twitter if you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and we'll put our heads together and we'll make something awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. See you guys and gals next week. Later. Bye.